It's okay to turn to the audience and say, I forgot what I was talking about. They love it. They love to see that you're human. They love to see vulnerability. They connect with it. There's not a person in that audience that hasn't forgotten what they're saying. When I spoke, I never addressed the fact that I'm gay. I was going out to a small Texas town to speak to their art association, and I decided that I was going to tell the group that being gay was part of my learning to be more self-aware. Because I was gay, I had to watch myself. There are gifts in everything, and there's gifts in everything that we think is a limitation. I had the gift of being gay. I started learning to watch how I come across. How do I stand? How do I approach? But there's a gift there. So I went out to this place and I did it. I stood up there and I said to this whole room, and it was fine. They were lovely. In fact, it was better than fine. When you put your vulnerabilities out there, I can't tell you how many times someone from the audience will come up to me afterward and say, you moved me when you talked about that, because I too am gay, or I talk about, I have a tremor, and I spoke at a senior facility this summer, and I stood up there and said, I'm nervous about my tremor when I teach art. I'm afraid of it a little bit. And this woman came up to me and she was shaking and she said, she was almost teary-eyed, and she said, you just moved me so much by talking about your vulnerabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also when people come to me and they say, I'm so afraid of making mistakes. It's the exact of it, because when we are allow ourselves to make mistakes and be okay with them, because we know that mistakes happen and we decided, maybe we've prepared ourselves to make mistakes. That's something that I recommend.
I love that.
So that we can feel okay with it. I've always had amazing response from the audience. After the pandemic, I went and I did a talk for a chamber group, and I was talking about different steps to get comfy on camera. And I think I had 6. And as I was preparing my script, I thought to myself, Linda, you're going to forget one of those. 6 is a lot of things for you to remember. It's just is. And my answer to myself was, that's okay. If I forget, I forget. So sure enough, in the talk, I got to 5 and I said, can't remember what 5 is. I said, but don't worry, it'll either come back or I'll email it to you. And then I moved on. I went to 6. I went, okay, here's number 5. I just remembered it. And 3 people came up to me afterwards and they said, that was fantastic. I've always been afraid of making mistakes and afraid that, what am I going to do if I forget? And you just modeled for us how to do it when it's no big deal. And that's how it can be. Mistakes don't have to be such a big deal, but we're traumatized, as you know, from making mistakes because of our educational system. We're penalized and we get worse grades for every mistake we make. So of course
Right.
we're afraid of making mistakes. What would school be like if instead of being graded for the fewest mistakes, the highest, we were graded for how many experiments we took, or risks that we took, or explorations we made?
How many mistakes we made. That
And
it's
how many
good,
mistakes?
and in a sense that it's good to make them, because that's how we
Exactly.
learn. You say that in your book. There's a section there, and I want to share that with the listeners. You say, it's okay to turn to the audience and say, I forgot what I was talking about.
People love that. It's audience participation.
I will tell you, from my experience, you are correct. You're 100%. They love it. They love to see that you're human. They love to see vulnerability. They connect with it. There's not a person in that audience that hasn't forgotten what they're saying
Absolutely. Absolutely.
mid-sentence.
And they like to help out.
So that being vulnerable and being real, it's all about, like you just said, being present.
Yeah. Yeah. Or needing to know all the answers. So like in a Q&A, if you don't know the answer, I talk about, I can get back to you. I can send an email. I don't know the answer to that. Or you can say, I don't know, but is there anyone else here who has some thoughts on it? And then you've switched into the role of facilitator there, where
That is
you're
I
inviting,
love that. And that's a
you're
brave thing, right? It's a brave
Yeah,
thing.
and you can invite other people to share their expertise or understanding. Yeah.
I was on a retreat. I was leading a retreat last spring, and we were talking about something. And I tracked some pretty interesting people on these retreats, and one woman was a therapist. And I was bringing up a concept, and I could just see in her face, I could just see that she was like bursting to talk about it. And I just turned to her and said, "Why don't you tell us what you're thinking?" I totally gave up that, and like you said, become the facilitator. And then she with her own perspective and her own languaging, described what I was trying to describe in a different way.
And that's so beautiful because then it's like a kaleidoscope where you shift the kaleidoscope and you're looking at the same pieces, but with a different viewpoint. Yeah, that's so nice.